Hi everyone. Thanks for joining
Hello.
us. We'll get everyone a few seconds to jump in and then we will introduce our guest that we have here today. Apologies that we are 30 seconds late. Stephen had to take a call. I'd like to hope that it was a cold call from a salesperson that he was very kindly taking the time out to answer.
No, no, such luck.
So the idea of today is we have a habit of all sitting around a room, and I say we as sales and marketing professionals sitting around a room and thinking, I wonder how we can get the attention of scientists. I wonder what they're thinking. I wonder where they're going to be. I wonder how they're going to behave if we do this. And today we're basically just going to ask.
Okay.
So we have got a really nice spread of geographies here today, as well as sciences here today, so that we're nicely representative across the industry. I have put up your blurbs here so that I don't have to try and remember them and make a terrible job of then regurgitating that. So we have Matthew, Eliza, and Stephen here today with me. And Eliza's based in the US, Stephen's based in Canada, and Matthew's based in the UK and Europe. So a really nice spread because I know the audience that'll be watching here today are across all the different geographies as well. Just for your guys' benefit, the people that will be on the call today are typically sales and marketing people that sell into science, into academia. So they might sell consumables, they might sell large equipment, they might sell services, but everyone is understanding today sort of how you make those decisions, where you live, what way you're thinking about making those decisions, and that's what we're going to run through. I have some very selfish questions that I would like to ask myself. But if the audience have any questions, if you pop them into the Q&A box, I'll be able to ask them as well. Just to get started then, do you want to give me a very quick intro of your sort of science and your background, and actually more importantly, what kind of products that you would typically be buying or typically be using with that? We'll start with you, Eliza.
Sure. So I'm Eliza. As Laura mentioned, I'm currently based in the US, but I am Canadian. So I did my undergrad and doctoral training in Canada and came here for my postdoc. I work on investigating infectious diseases during pregnancy and how they impact the placenta and fetal development. So I do a lot of tissue culture, cell culture. We do both 2D and 3D cell culture models. A lot of microscopy and immunohistochemistry, and then just typical kind of wet lab techniques, biochemical techniques, Western blots, that kind of stuff.
Nice. Perfect. Matthew, you're on the other side of the spectrum in the physics side.
Good side, yeah, absolutely. So I'm experimental physics, specialized in condensed matter, so the physics of materials. We grow and synthesize new two-dimensional materials, and then we measure them at extreme low temperature, extreme magnetic field, and extreme high pressure, which means squeezing them between opposed diamonds. So we place a lot of orders for big, expensive cryogenic equipment and small, expensive diamonds quite a lot of the time.
Nice. And Steve?
I do mainly protein expression and purification and characterization. So for the growth stuff, we would need, culture media, uh, plastic wear flasks, things like that. For purification, chromatography resins. Uh, we have an FPLC, so we're having a variety of resins that we would need. And for characterization, many basic spectroscopy like UV-Vis, but also since one of our proteins actually consumes nitric oxide, we use a free radical analyzer with nitric oxide sensitive electrodes, uh, hydrogen peroxide, and also oxygen sensitive electrodes as well too. So those are the major things we do. We also have this is new since Eliza was in my lab. We also have like a fluorescent microplate reader as well too. So we'd be looking at say plasticware for those sorts of things too.
Okay, nice. So we do cover a big spectrum of all the things that our people in the audience will be selling, so it's really interesting. So just to get started then, just to get into it, in terms of if you have a new product that you want to buy, where do you begin? Do you do a lot of the research yourself? Do you ring up a salesperson? How do you determine even where you should look? I'll put that to Eliza first because you're first on my screen.
Yeah, so we currently have a lab manager. So my first step is usually to go to the lab manager and say, hey, I'm looking for something like this. Can you maybe find the cheapest price for us? Um, but if I'm looking into something more specialized that I need to do a little bit more research on, I'm just literally Googling the technique that I need and looking through probably the main vendors like Thermo, Sigma, that kind of stuff, and seeing what my options are, especially for price. Um, Also sometimes interacting with people at conferences. If there's someone who's doing a similar technique that I'm looking to get started on, I'll ask them for their catalog numbers, especially because we do infection studies. A lot of our infectious agents are kind of picky in terms of what reagents and products they thrive in. So we're often looking at what other people have used and trying to mimic those exact product numbers.
There's quite a few things there, and I'll come back to the trade shows 'cause that's a topic in itself. But when we talk then about Googling things, obviously that world has changed. And for Matthew, for example, is it still Google that you would use, or do you believe it when the AI pops up at the top, or are you too skeptical and you have to go in and actually read the source?
Yeah, I scroll right past that thing. So yeah, it would be just old-fashioned search engine for me. Um, but if you want my take on the previous question, it's kind of falls into two camps. If I'm buying a big piece of kit,
Mm.
that has to be years in advance because at least in the UK, we have to say, right, I want to do Science X. We're going to write the grant. I need quotes, please, from 3 suppliers that I want to buy the new cryogenic equipment that's going to cost $500,000 or something. Okay, sure. And then 1 year later, we get the grant. And then a year after that, we can place the order. And so basically, I will be scouting people well in advance of getting it. And it will be that I will go to a conference mainly, and there will be a booth with someone saying, look, we've got this cool new equipment. I go, gosh, that is brilliant. That would allow me to do X. And I stash it up here, and then years later we can say, okay, I've always wanted to get one of those. So it can look like there's nothing, but then suddenly I would place an order later. Or I don't win the
And
grant and no one wins. And then for
and a
small
quick one
consumables,
well, a
sorry,
quick
Mike.
one on that one. So
Yeah.
you saw the base piece of equipment at a booth. Are you slightly biased to that place that you saw it originally, or can your mind be turned whenever
Oh,
you get those
massively,
free grants
massively, and
in?
I'm extremely bribable. Like they give me mugs and bits of Lego and things like this. But no, it would, but I would be very, I would be assessing them on their technical abilities, right? If you put someone in the booth that didn't know anything about the product, then I would be quite put off because the scientist is quite arrogant about these things. But if there's someone there that can talk to me confidently about the design and how it works and give me hard specs and they say, oh, here's my business card, we can talk about this later, then that goes on the wish list and maybe I buy one later. Other than that, it's going to other people's labs, doing lab tours and going, gosh, that's a nice piece of kit. I'd quite like one myself, which is what we've done for one of the big pieces of capital equipment we bought recently. I attended the testing of a drilling system and said, okay, we're going to get one. Exactly this product. I just want this. But for small equipment, we have in our university's online purchasing system, we have a sort of searchable catalog. So if I just need a spanner or a microscope slides, just do it there first. And if I can't find it, we'll go on Google, scroll down until I find a supplier that I know is registered with the university, Farnell or RS or something like that. Find the correct code. And yeah, there's a big barrier for us to go to a supplier that we haven't used before.
Okay, I will come back to that as well
Yeah.
for anyone that's on the call that is new. Stephen, what do you do?
It really varies with what I'm looking for. So for example, I mentioned that free radical analyzer. Basically is only one game in town for that. So I always go to their website just to see what they have on offer, but it would be nice if there was some competition with respect to them. Actually, I go to eBay sometimes too. That's like the first place I go to because that analyzer I got was basically brand new, but about half the price of buying new. So it doesn't hurt to go to eBay and just to see what's available. Failing that, then yeah, and especially if we're writing, say, grants for new equipment, it's pretty much what Matthew said. We need quotes from 3 vendors. Usually we ask around our university if people have these pieces of equipment like a -80 freezer or a plate reader. There are people on campus who have them, so we ask them how happy they are, and what were the alternatives they were thinking of as well too. And then for just garden variety stuff, it's going to Thermo, going to VWR, Sigma. Um, but I do sometimes use AI. So Claude, sometimes I'll say, okay, I'm looking for this, who makes it? And it will pop up, the usual ones, but sometimes there can be useful saying, well, here's an alternative that could be less expensive. So it really is all over the place with how we do it.
And when you do reach out to them, so Matthew had mentioned, someone on the booth needs to be very knowledgeable. When you do then ring that person, do you need that salesperson to be a scientist, or do you need them just to get you the answers quickly and be responsive?
Yeah, I think as long as they're engaged, and so the best sales reps we have around Trent, the ones we remember, are the ones who, well, the Thermo rep and the Fisher rep until recently, they were always around and they made their faces known. They were always guys. So our Philiopoulos was our Fisher rep, and then I think Kim McFarlane was our VWR rep. And there's another outfit in Canada called Mandel Scientifics. They represent Shimadzu and places like things like that. They are also very good at getting, so if they're even if on campus, when we try to contact them, they're very prompt about responding to us. And so that counts for quite a bit then, is the engagement. So they don't have to be scientists, but if they can contact scientists who get back to them and get back to us, then that's fine too.
Yeah. And in terms of then contacting, it sounds to me that it's people that we're still wanting to speak to, because everyone has these lovely bots and live chats on their website and all of that sort
No.
of stuff. But really, we just want to pick up the phone and speak to somebody.
Well, usually, I mean, if it can be done with a chatbot or something like that, usually it's a kind of a garden variety thing. But if you say want to buy a piece of equipment, like a big piece of equipment, for us it would be like about $30,000 or more, then you're not going to do that just through without any kind of human contact. So we want to talk to people because we'll have questions that say the chat boxes can't answer, AI cannot answer as well too. And oftentimes what they'll say is talk to somebody. So they say, well, I'm giving you this answer, but really you should phone somebody. So
Yeah, it's been quite old fashioned for us with things like vacuum equipment, which is 5, 10K, something like that. We say, oh, could I get a quote, please? And then the salesman says, oh, I'm actually in the Birmingham area. Can I drop by? He comes and gives you his business card and you talk about the stuff. That works. That does actually work.
yeah.
And then I know when I've got some teething issues, switching the thing on, or I want to ask something, there's a person that I can talk to, like a human being. Or I can say, yeah, even in the quote process or the buying process, that does work, like actually physically coming to see us.
Especially if you have modifications to the equipment that you want as well, because you don't always buy it just as is, but for fluorescence, you might say, well, we don't want the standard filters. Can we get this set of filters? Really, that's best done through a person, and a good person will say, yeah, we'll make it happen. So
exactly, yeah. We were looking to buy a glove box last year, which is like £60,000. And we got 2 quotes, one from manufacturer that will remain nameless, one that just took 2 months to reply and then came back and said, here's our standard offering. This is, like it or lump it. And then the other one, that the 2 experts were on the train straight to Birmingham. They said, and we sat and we had a big meeting and they said, we could do this. Oh, no, that's not really, but maybe we could talk to the factory. We'll get back to you on this. We could maybe fit this thing. And we had that back and forth and we absolutely went with them. It was also cheaper, but we also went with them. So that does that kind of engagement, because we're doing quite specialized stuff and we want to have good faith in it. We can't, there's the line on the grant. Once we've used it, we can't go back and buy a second one, right? We only get one chance at it. So we want to be confident.
Yeah. Well, what about the other way? So you're saying that you want to be able to, call them and they have to pick up the phone very quickly. What if I rang you, Eliza? Would you be likely to answer?
I was thinking about, as the other 2 panelists were talking, that maybe it's different for big equipment, and like in my position as a postdoc, I'm usually dealing more with like purchases of consumables and that kind of stuff. But I actually don't like when salespeople come to the lab, at least if they're gonna bother me, because like I don't have kind of the authority to make decisions on big pieces of equipment and stuff like that. And for smaller consumables, like I'm biased towards what I'm already using, again, because I mentioned, that like with plastics and media and stuff like that, I know what works for my culture systems. And so I'm not super likely to want to try a new product. So I don't know how effective it is maybe for smaller items and consumables to be going directly to labs and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, I don't think I've ever actually had a salesperson call me. Like, definitely I get emails and stuff like that, but quite frankly, I ignore them unless there's like a very big promo, which I'll just forward to our lab manager because maybe they want to capitalize on it. But
But
I
you
think
read
coming,
them. You don't
yeah, I
reply, but
kind
you
of
do read them.
skim them. Yeah, I skim them to see if there's anything relevant to me or to our lab, and then I might hand them off to who might be able to act on them. But yeah, I think for day-to-day items and consumables and stuff like that, at least in my opinion, I don't know how effective it is to be kind of like canvassing in person. But I also work at this is the first institution I've worked at that has like really high security to enter the building, so salespeople can't just like come in freely. So maybe, I don't know, that's a little bit different. Like we get kind of one visit every few months, whereas when I've been at other institutions, like when I was in Canada, we'd get a lot more frequent visits. But
I think,
What about you, Matthew? Oh, sorry, Stephen, go on ahead.
uh, along with what Eliza said, I think what does work, at least for me, is I don't like when somebody just drops by my office. But what some sales reps will do is that they'll email me and say, okay, I'm going to be on campus on this day. Would you have a chance to meet? And then you're more likely to think about that and say, well, you're more likely to respond either, well, no, we don't need anything, or well, yes, or if you're by, just if you're on campus, please drop by and we can talk about things. So I think the heads up, I think that's the
Or
best.
indeed, you can say, I'm not looking to buy
Yeah,
rats or whatever, and then you don't waste each other's time. Yeah.
yeah.
And is email the best medium for that, or would you answer the phone, or if someone sent you a LinkedIn message, or what's
Well,
the way
my
to
phone
get you?
doesn't work, so
Yeah, I'm
I,
not sure this phone in the corner of my office is actually plugged in.
yeah,
So yeah, it's email or bust.
I
emails, I
think
think is the
email.
thing.
And what about any other social media? I know that a lot of scientists like to hang out in blue sky and places like that. Not for you
What's
guys?
that?
I
Okay.
think
That's
I
like
guess the
I
answer is
think
no if I say what's that, but
yeah.
I think
Uh,
like Twitter was kind of, I don't know if I was ever contacted by like salespeople on Twitter, but that, at least in the US, was kind of the most largely social media for scientists. Like that seemed bigger than LinkedIn, I would say. But then when, X happened and all of that, there definitely was a migration. I know people tried to get on Blue Sky, but it just kind of never really took off. So I have seen more of a shift towards LinkedIn, but to be honest, I rarely check my LinkedIn unless, it's time for a conference or something like that. So any promotional email or messages I get through LinkedIn, I often don't read. I only picked up for this one because it was Novin, who I already knew, that was messaging me. So
Yeah.
yeah, I have no
All right.
social media at all. And yeah, a lot of contact is through networks, like in-person networks of knowing someone.
Okay. We have loads of questions here that I need to get to before people shout at me for only asking my own, but I have one elephant in the room first to ask. So I'll put it to you, Eliza, for someone that's in the US. In terms of tariffs and funding, NIH funding changes, how have you seen that change, how you've behaved as a purchaser, or how has the lab changed and how they go about these things?
yeah, so our lab has definitely been impacted so much so that we're actually moving institutions. So I'm currently at Baylor College of Medicine, which has historically been the #1 recipient for NIH funding in Texas, which is great when NIH funding is, consistent and reliable, but it also means that our income sources are really not very diversified. So with kind of the cutbacks to NIH and just the uncertainty, Baylor's been hit really hard financially and has kind of clawed back, a lot of things like seed funding and purchasing power. So that's actually caused my PI to leave. We're moving to Penn State at the end of the summer. So we've definitely seen an impact. The institution itself has placed a lot of constraints on what we can and can't purchase. And, like someone from our lab tried to purchase mechanical pencils. And we were told, oh, no, we have some in the office in the department. Like you can't place this order. And someone came by and dropped it off. So the purchasing power has definitely shifted. I think just overall, we're not able to spend as much or not looking to spend as much. Hopefully that will change at a new institution that maybe hasn't been as impacted as much, but definitely there's been a mind shift. And pre all of this, we were, as members of the lab, we were fairly free to do, our own purchasing and place orders for whatever we needed. But now there's definitely more of a kind of streamlined approach of running things past the lab manager who's in touch with the PI and that kind of stuff to make sure we're only really buying what we, really need.
Interesting. Stephen, you're Canada based, but do you see an impact on it, even though arguably that's more an American thing?
No, I think except for prices, I think it's more expensive to get things now, especially if they're coming from the States. For that theoretical analysts who've noticed that with the spare parts that we need. But other than that, it really doesn't affect us. Funding, I think it's gone up a little bit in the last couple of years because I think there's a recognition that this is something we need to do. And there's also an effort, and Eliza's probably aware of this as well too, to bring back Canadian researchers who are in the States to Canada. So there's things called the Accelerate program where they're looking for real heavy hitters who have established labs down in the States to move their operation back up to Canada. There might be something similar for young faculty as well too, or postdocs. So, but I'm not aware of that yet. But it wouldn't surprise me if there was an effort to recruit people to come back. That could only be done if they actually increase the amount of money they put towards research rather than just say, getting it from the people who already have money, because the NSERC grants, the average size is nowhere near what like an NIH grant is or a CAHR grant. So I think my yearly grant is about 35,000 Canadian, which is enough to get by, enough for a few graduate students and to buy equipment. And there's also Canada Foundation of Innovation, so CFI, for major equipment purchases. So yeah, you can do stuff here. And I would say that it really has not changed that much. I mean, we just look at what's been happening in the States and just kind of saying, what the hell is going on down there? So
that's what we're saying here too.
Yeah, well, I did my postdoc at NIH. And I was talking to people down there. I thought it was bulletproof because they said, well, actually, both the Republicans and the Democrats like to fund it. And I think that's actually shown too, because when the president proposes cuts to NIH funding, Congress restores those cuts, the same like with NASA as well too. So there's what the president has in his head, and there's what everybody else thinks. So, hopefully for Eliza's sake, things will be better in a few years, but who knows?
Interesting, yeah. Matthew, I don't want to leave you out here, but I assume in the physics world in the UK, you're
sure.
fairly away from those sort of things.
Less drama, but at the moment, just a general sort of tightening of belts. Everything's being squeezed. Generally, these things go in cycles, and I think we're just on a downward part of the cycle at the moment. So I've got a big grant, so I'm protected for the length of it, but it's harder to win new grants at the moment, and there's redundancies and all of this stuff going on. So you're not flush with cash at the moment.
I have questions here that I'm going to run through, so apologies that they might be somewhat quick fire and maybe not in all the same theme. And I think probably just politely shout whichever ones you want to answer. So someone's asked, how do you feel about the reps maintaining contact after the project is over? So you're not actively purchasing. Do you want to hear about new stuff? Do you want to be checked in upon?
Very situational. If I'm buying a $500,000 piece of big capital equipment and there's new products coming out, then it's good to be informed and that those newsletters are valued. If I bought a set of Allen keys, I don't need to know that there's a new one, right?
Yeah, I'd say similarly, like for small pieces of equipment and stuff like that, I don't really need follow-up because the chances that I'm going to maybe go to the same company for smaller consumables and stuff like that are a lot lower than me just going to where, I've bought before or has kind of the best deal.
Do you read field-specific newsletters like genetic engineering, biotech news? Would you be more or less likely to purchase from sellers who advertise in those mediums?
I don't even know what those are, so I don't
read them. Like magazines and things, or websites specifically. No, okay. But
so
what about
adverts in the physics magazines? I would see. and it would soak into the brain. I would at least
Okay.
know the name. Yeah.
Okay. What if someone has like a tabletop demo on your campus, or they like, bring a piece of equipment there and invite you to it?
Usually that's said in advance as well, too, just so you know that such a thing is happening. But then, yeah, I think that attracts more attention because the only reason they would do that is that somebody on campus has already, set this up. It's probably somebody you know. And so you'd be going up, you definitely would go up to take a look at, the gadget just to see what it can do.
Yeah, I think this works.
Especially,
We like to see things. I like to hold exciting equipment in my hands, and we're curious and nosy people. So yes, that does work, I think.
but the physicist.
Yeah.
I used to sell to both physicists and biologists. And biologists were like, "Where's the on button?" The physicists already
Yes.
had to like spatner or the to try and take it apart. And I'm like, "No, just leave it alone." Um, Eliza, the same for you.
Yeah, I'm trying to think like again, maybe at Baylor because we're kind of restricted in like who can come in and out. I don't think we necessarily have that often. Baylor's kind of interesting in that our labs are kind of siloed too, so we don't have a
Mm,
lot of interaction with other labs. But when I was at University of Toronto for my PhD, definitely like if someone had new materials and there was a demo, we would be going up to see. So yeah, I think it works in institutions where the institution is kind of collaborative and there's a lot more communication between labs and scientists.
perfect.
But I think it
What
works.
attracts you?
Sorry,
Go ahead,
I think
Matthew.
it
Sorry.
works much better at conferences. The conference, I've got an hour where I've got nothing else that I could possibly be doing.
Mm.
And you can bring your good stuff, right? And there's 500 people in the room who all need the same equipment as me.
Mm.
So I think it really is worth exhibiting at conferences.
That
And
was my next question, actually.
okay.
Like, what makes you know it's perfect? What makes you go by a booth, or do you just do them methodically one by one, or what makes you decide this is the one I want to speak to?
Oh, the loot you get.
Yeah,
That does
Yeah.
help.
free stuff.
Yeah.
But no, it depends. Yeah. I will go and just get a sense for, I'll just go by all of them, right? And see what they've got.
Yeah.
And if there's some stuff that will actually be relevant and help me, then I will have a good chat with them.
One thing that I wanted to comment too is that these days I go more to field specific meetings that are a lot smaller and a lot of them don't have vendors there at all. So I've kind of missed that interaction because when I've been at bigger conferences like FASIB and stuff like that was a fun part of it, getting to go through all the booths and stuff. And I guess from like I don't know, a sales perspective, maybe going to the smaller meetings isn't as big of a payoff because, you have a clientele of like 200 people total
Or
attending
they
the
don't let
meeting.
us in.
But, oh,
Sometimes they don't let
interesting.
us in.
Okay.
They keep it literally tight. There's some like the Keystone Symposium, or it's either a fortune to go, or they don't even let us in because they don't want a pile of people selling to you. The idea is that you want to chat amongst yourselves.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, because I wasn't aware of that because I was thinking it might be nice, at the smaller conferences I'm at to have that. But yeah, if they don't let you in, then there's nothing I can really do about that.
True. What about a poster? So you're saying the booths are nice and you're seeing the equipment and things. What if they have like a scientist presenting a poster? Would you ever attend to
Mm.
listen to that?
Yeah, yes. The answer is that has happened in the past. Yes.
I've done that. I think I'm more likely to go up to someone if they have something tangible, like Matthew was saying, being able to hold something in your hands or like physically see it, I think is really appealing.
Mhm.
But I have been at symposiums and stuff like that where people are presenting new technology in a poster, and it's usually one that I'll like stop by just because then it's also kind of feels like less of a kind of like sales interaction and more of a scientific interaction, which I think some scientists are more comfortable with.
Yeah, makes sense.
And
Um,
as someone who's organizing a conference next year, should I call you, Laura, next year? How does someone
Absolutely.
organizing a conference find people exhibitors? How does that work in the other direction?
Well, I don't want to do an accidental sales pitch for Stylites here, but yes, we know who's exhibiting at the different
Right.
conferences, so I could get you that list. Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay.
Um, what we do mostly is help the people that are attending the conference know that you're going to be there and make sure that they can target and reach out to you. So, like, for example, if someone was to email you and say, Matthew, I see that you're doing this research, we'll be at this booth, come by, see us. The idea is that hopefully you'd be more inclined to say, oh, I need to go to that place because they said to come by.
That would work, yes.
What aspects will put you away from considering the lowest price for a key product in terms of pre-sale, after-sale support? How do you measure quality, reliability, no quibble guarantees? I guess, like, if you had a list of things and someone was the cheapest, why would you not just choose the cheapest? What would make you want to choose the other one? I guess if you know the other one better.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. If it's a company that I am familiar with, I'm probably more likely to go with them just for, potential reliability's sake. So I think notoriety and just the name carries a lot of weight.
I feel like this would be really depressing for people that aren't like
I know, I'm sorry.
big brands. Like, how on earth, if we sent you samples or something, would you use them? Or if
Yeah.
we, like, how do we get your attention?
Well,
Samples, I think, yeah,
yeah,
would be effective.
samples and price. So for a long time, and I think even now, we don't order a lot of plastic consumables from VWR or Thermo. There's an outfit in Quebec called Ultident, and their rep used to come by all the time, and they give really, really good prices. And they're just like disposable pipette tips, so it's hard to mess those things up. So in those sorts of cases, yeah, you would go for the cheap price, try them out, and as long as they don't do something awful, you probably continue doing them. So yeah, we do look around for alternatives. But for larger pieces of equipment, you really want to go by, the companies that have the reputation, not just for good instrument, but also good support as well too.
You haven't mentioned like publications. Would you ever sit and read someone else's publication and look through what equipment they're doing and reach out to them, or is that just too deep research?
I
Um,
think that's, sorry, go ahead, Steve.
no, you go ahead. I'm just kind of making an sound right now. So
I think that's probably actually, especially if there's a new technique that I'm wanting, that's probably the first place that I'm going, is somebody who's published on it and looking at exactly which catalog numbers and which equipment that they're using, just to try and like lower the risk of, trying to replicate it and it not happening because, the media is different or something like that. So yeah, even before Googling, if I have a specific, assay or new experiment that I want to try, I'm definitely going to publications and looking at what they've used and trying to get as close to what I can as identical to what they use.
Yeah, I
yeah,
echo that. Exactly the same. We would look through the methods section of the paper and it will list the exact equipment. Sometimes we get in touch with the authors. Sometimes when we get in touch with the salesperson, then they have co-published a paper with one of the previous clients. Okay, right, these guys know science, we can trust them.
Okay.
And again, on the previous question, we're such creatures of habit, right? We know that a process works if we do exactly these things, exactly this glue and exactly this, and we just don't. We're so scared to change it. And the way to get us over that is, I think, free samples, as Steve said. Then I'm not taking a risk. Again,
yeah,
I have one line item on the grant and I can't buy it again if it doesn't work, so I'm not going to take the risk. The big thing for us is diamonds. We buy diamonds, they need to be polished exactly, parallel perfectly, and we could maybe get cheaper ones from other countries and things, but we would be taking such a risk that are they going to work? Or we're going to spend a year doing our experiment and then it fails at the end. So
Yeah.
companies that are, new companies that are selling diamonds to us do actually give us free samples of diamonds, believe it or not. And that is the only way that we would ever consider buying.
Interesting.
there's also this relates also not just to equipment, but also to services. So I think Eliza would be familiar with this too. If you have to order oligonucleotides, or doing whole gene synthesis or things like that, there's a bunch of people who do that, and the price range is quite broad. So you might just say, okay, well, I'll take a chance on these people. They're cheaper. We'll just give them like one task, and if they do a good job on that, then we will keep on going with them.
Right.
So there's that as well too.
Yeah, or even on the topic of free samples, like with services, we've had people come in and say, hey, we're a new sequencing company. Like, do you want one free, sequencing trial? And that's, again, the only way that we'll try a new company. And then if we do it with the one free and it works and it's cheaper, then of course we're going to go there.
Yeah.
Okay. Someone, and it's actually has been said a few times here, but I'm going to just ask it again because everyone's asking. Once you've received your grant, is it too late for another salesperson to come and contact you? Is that too late an indicator? Do
No,
they need to have got to you beforehand?
no. As long as you haven't committed yet. So I was in a situation like this with the last CFI grant we had to get a new spec. I just thought we were going to get like a carry. But the more I thought about that, in fact, I wrote a carry like spectrophotometer in the grant, but I ended up getting one from Shimadzu just because it was a newer technology, maybe a little bit more expensive, but since it was just at the beginning of this cycle, it's going to be around for a long time. So I would say it's always worth companies to approach us, as long as you haven't got the bits already.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt.
Yeah, I'd almost say from what I've observed here, like it's maybe more effective once we get the grant because honestly, when we're writing the grant out, so much of it is hypothetical at that point because the funding, chances are so low that yeah, we might, look around a few places and throw something in the grant like a piece of equipment that we'd like to buy, but until we actually have the money in hand, we're not going to be seriously kind of looking into what we want to buy. So I think it's probably more effective after we get the grant to reach out because then we actually know exactly how much money we have to spend and all of that, and we're more seriously looking at making the purchase.
Makes sense. So we've chatted about big equipment, we've chatted about consumables, we've chatted about services. Someone is asking, what about software? Is there any difference when you come to purchasing software in terms of that process or your thinking?
My experience with purchasing software is usually having to buy, software that's associated with whatever equipment that we're using. So like my lab has a Nikon confocal microscope. And so I know the Nikon software is something that we're often discussing in the lab. So we're often, I think, restricted to the software that's compatible with our equipment. One of our biggest gripes, I think, as scientists in the lab is like, hey, you buy the equipment and then you buy the software, but then there's often like tiers within the software of certain functionalities that you have to pay more for and stuff like that, which we find really frustrating. But I guess I understand from a sales perspective, but I don't know necessarily how much wiggle room we have for people trying to pitch us new software because a lot of it is just tied to the specific equipment that we have.
I don't like software as a subscription, so we do a lot of curve fitting. We used to have programs that were, when I was a graduate student, we had some free programs for doing that kind of stuff, and actually quite small programs were still very effective. But nowadays, we have to pay through the nose for this kind of stuff, and I've been looking at alternatives to doing that. So it gets back to AI. I just this week, I gave it a few simple calculations to do, and it seemed to do okay. Something okay. Forget that company that we're buying from. Perhaps we can actually do this for free. So free is always the best.
Interesting. Yeah.
Cheap is the next best. But cheap, but they both have to work. So
yeah. Back on free. So
go on.
everyone
I was
is
just saying
obsessed with
more software. But carry on.
Sorry, people are saying free samples are great for people that sell consumables, but what if you have like big capital equipment? So how do you, if they send you demo equipment, would you test it in that way?
Yeah, but there's a limit to what you can do. So you really can't use like a demo NMR, but you can invite people down to see things though too.
Yeah.
Especially if they know that you're making a purchase, that the big companies know that. They will sometimes invite or could invite you down to say, look at whatever, or say, go to another institution that's close by and say, okay, we hear you're looking for an NMR. There's one just like that at University of Toronto or something like that. I mentioned this, Eliza, because we do have a new NMR here. So,
oh, nice.
Yeah.
Congrats. I was just thinking too that in my PhD lab when I was at University of Toronto, we bought, or not we bought, but there was the company Protein Simple had like one of their automated Western blotting machines that uses like capillary electrophoresis for Western blotting. So it's like a new technique. But someone had done a demo in our department, and then my PI was able to work out an agreement with the company where we bought the demo machine But instead of like buying the machine, the deal was that we had to buy a certain number of like kits to use the machine over, a certain period of time. So that was kind of the only way that our lab would have been able to have a piece of equipment like that, because it was like heavily discounted, but it kept us going because beyond the 1 year period when we had to buy a certain number of kits for, we had the machine. So we were still buying kits, beyond that. So I thought that was a creative way to get a new piece of technology into like the hands of people where it's more accessible, because you're not outright having to buy a brand new piece of equipment. It was more like we saw it, then we were able to have the demo machine in our lab and still paying for it in a certain way, but in a way that was accessible to us, and that also got other labs to come and use the equipment and stuff like that because they were interested in it.
My answer is when I bought my cryogenic equipment, I went and visited the factory and toured the production lines, spoke to the engineers, looked at similar systems that were being built for other customers, asked a lot of technical questions. What happens if there's a power cut? What happens if this? How does this thing? Have you thought about X? And that makes me confident. And also, I'm a nerd who's going to obviously love going and seeing all of this fun equipment. So
Did they pay for you to go, for you to travel?
they gave me an ice cream at lunch and in the canteen, but no.
Okay. Okay,
Never
interesting.
underestimate the power of free food, especially if you
Yeah,
want graduate
that's
students or
brilliant.
undergrads or postdocs there. Free food is the way to get us there still.
Yes. Or free coffee mugs. So
Yeah.
free t-shirts.
What about competition? So people that besmirch their competitors, how does that sort of impact your opinion of them?
I've never encountered that. I don't think I've ever seen an example where somebody would do that rather than actually pump their machine.
I don't think I've seen it either, but I can answer the question. I wouldn't like it.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would raise red flags for me, I think. Like if you have to, I don't know, it's like a bully. If you have to put other people down, like what are you hiding? What's your insecurity that's making you do that? Just tell me why,
Yeah.
your product is good.
Perfect. That's good to hear. We have a good reputation in the market, plus people that are selling to scientists don't do it. Regarding the new technology, in terms of a sales rep that has reached out to you in an email, do you value the time that they take to personalize that email to you, or do you not really care?
I think I'm more likely to interact with an email that's personalized. And I think my PI is too, like she will forward me things where someone has seen one of our recent preprints or a publication and has said, "Hi, I read your paper on blah, blah, blah. I thought this aspect was really interesting. We have this technique that we might be applicable if you wanted to do this kind of analysis." And it's very tailored to what we've already published or what we've preprinted. And those are the only kind of emails that she will forward to me. So I do think it's an effective way when it's personalized, especially for maybe a PI, and Matthew and Steve can comment on this, but someone who's, more focused on the big picture and how things actually benefit like the specific research going on in the lab, as opposed to the more granular aspects of, consumables and stuff like that.
So I think I'd give the caveat that it has to actually be personalized rather than a lazy attempt. I get a lot of emails that say, "Dear Mrs. Matthew, we read your recent paper. It's a great title. We think you would really like these dental drills."
Yeah.
I'm not sure how you came to this conclusion if you really did read that paper. So that obviously makes me have very strong negative opinions about the company.
Interesting. That was one of the questions. What can someone write in a cold email that would make you delete it? That was one of the questions someone put in. So there's an example of lazy personalization. It's funny what I'm hearing as well is kind of counter to what we sort of have as when we're selling into an academic lab, we generally, and I speak we as all of the sales and marketing, we sort of have this idea that the PIs are too busy to answer any of our emails or attend anything, and we should go after the postdocs because they're the ones that actually make the decisions and will actually be able to get in front of. But I'm sort of hearing that you should go after the PI because they're the people that are making the decisions, and even if you don't see it because Eliza yours has forwarded it to you and you're the ones actioned it, it was actually her that kind of made the decision that this is one we're going to look at.
Yeah, I would say so. But I do think that especially like my lab is very postdoc heavy. We have for postdocs, and all of us are very much kind of the big drivers of our projects. So I do think there's a benefit in coming directly to us, because we can also kind of like screen things that we think might actually be something that's realistic that we want to incorporate into our research. But I think maybe, I don't know if it's just the specific companies that have reached out, but often, especially when it's following up on a publication or something like that, they're just contacting the corresponding author, which makes sense because their contact information is there. So I don't actually get a lot of those things coming straight to me. So unless we are the ones kind of reaching out to a company, like my fellow postdoc right now is wanting to implement some new technology for the lab, and he was the one who had to kind of go out and reach out to companies and interact with them in that way. But I think the way that they often reach us, if they're not just like coming into the lab or if we haven't purchased from them before, is to go through our PI.
Interesting. And what about the frequency of emails? When do you just start to get a bit annoyed?
Yeah, I only need one email ever from a company to know that it exists. I definitely don't want to be pestered, right? If I haven't replied, there's probably a reason for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe just product updates or something to keep top of mind.
Yeah, I definitely don't
Perfect.
want something like on a super regular basis. Like we have some companies that we order from that will send out maybe like quarterly promotional, updates if they have a seasonal sale going on or something like that. And I'll skim through those. But if someone's contacting me on like a monthly or weekly basis with updates, I'm not going to read them.
So it sounds to me, if I want to sell to you guys, I go to the PI, I try to get their attention at a conference, and I definitely exhibit at a conference. I need a really, really good swag at that conference to really get you guys over.
Yes.
And then if I'm doing cold outreach to you, I probably should do my homework, find someone that you know or someone that is in your area, even go to the trouble of getting that publication and sending it to you to say they're using our equipment in this. This might be interesting. And then suggest dropping in, except for in Baylor, because they'll not let us in the door. But hopefully in your new place, you'll be a bit more welcoming. But is there anything more you would add to that sort of sum up of how we get your attention? Oh, and we wait till you get the grant first before we bother you, because otherwise you're busy writing hypothetical grants.
No. I have to know about it well in advance.
Yeah. Europe, you got to do it 2 years ahead of time. You have to read their mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you hear nothing from me, and then you'll get an email after 3 years saying, I would like to place the quote that you sent me 3 years ago.
Does not help me with my pipeline forecast, Matthew. You're the people that I roll my eyes at. We call you that's the blue bird, is what we call it in the industry.
Yeah, I wish it were different.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. That was really helpful. Some things confirmed what I thought, and actually a lot of things were different to what I thought. But thank you so much for your time, because I know you're all very busy. And I will be certainly hitting the emails harder than I maybe was before, and maybe mixing it up a little less on social media. Thanks everyone for joining us as well, and for all your questions. Sorry, Stephen.
There was a bunch of questions on the chat. I don't know if we've answered them all, but hopefully if even we didn't do so directly, that it would still provide us some information for people.
Yes, we did. I mean, I know there's like 30 whatever, but we went through most of them there. Some of them are sort of duped. So yes, I think that they're well covered. But what we'll actually do is write this up a bit as well of our general learning, so that we can post it so other people will benefit. And but thank you so much for your time. Really, really helpful.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Bye. Thanks everyone.
Thank you very much.